Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on wherever you are. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Arun. I'm a customer success manager at SciNote, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Ava. Ava, do you want to say hi?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Eva, and I'm a customer success manager here at SciNote. And today I will be helping Arun. I will be taking your questions. So please use the Q&A section that's enabled for you. Whether it's a question or a comment, I will try to help to answer during the webinar, or we will just leave the questions for later for Arun. And if we don't manage to answer everything on time, we will make sure to follow up with you later.
Perfect. Thank you, Ava. Ava, can you also confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you again for attending this webinar. So the purpose of today's webinar, as you may have noticed from the registration page, is focusing on compliance and how SciNote can be a tool to help your organization or lab achieve compliance with various compliance standards. One important point I would like to emphasize before we move further is that using SciNote does not automatically make your organization compliant. SciNote is merely a tool with some compliance-focused features. So you will need to have strong internal processes and have your users trained and following these processes in order to ensure compliance. In this webinar, we're going to be focusing on a few SciNote features and some of their applications on how they can help you get closer towards compliance. And some of these features include our electronic signatures, audit trails, access restrictions, data security, and unlimited teams. As Ava mentioned, if you have any questions as I'm presenting, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box and she will answer them throughout the webinar. And of course, if there are any questions towards the end, we are going to have some time for a bit of Q&A towards the end. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. So as I mentioned, one of the features we are going to be looking at is the electronic signatures. The electronic signatures is part of SciNote's 21 CFR Part 11 add-on. And the electronic signatures in SciNote can be used for a variety of use cases. So let's go ahead and take a look at what some of those might be. The first use case or application that I'd like to go over is using electronic signatures for signing off on batch records. So let's say you are doing some in-house manufacturing, whether it's kit builds or anything that's reagents or anything that's being manufactured in-house. Electronic signatures will play a very critical role in the review and approval of the manufacturing steps, as well as any quality control inspections. So let's dive into an example that I've put together here. So I have a dedicated team in SciNote for manufacturing, and I've created an example project, which is an assay kit build. So we have Project Alpha assay kit build. And if I jump into the project, I've created an experiment for the batch that we are going to be looking at or manufacturing today. So we have batch 001, 14 June 2023. And when I jump into this experiment, you'll see that I have a workflow of several tasks or steps that are involved in the manufacturing process. And I'll quickly walk you through each of these steps and point out where some of the quality control inspections might be and how we can implement electronic signatures along the way. So quick run through. First, we have incoming material inspection. So let's say you are ordering raw materials from your suppliers. Before you start using them, you are going to be taking account of them, reviewing them, inspecting them, and logging them in some sort of a system or having this as some sort of a record. And once you have all the material inspected, you are ready to begin manufacturing your components. In my case here, since it's a kit build, we have preparations of various reagents. We're going to be preparing our positive controls, negative controls, our calibrators for this assay, some master mix, and also the instructions for use or user manual for the kit. And lastly, once all of these steps have been completed, we will be assembling the kit. And if there are any reagents that need to go through lyophilization for stability, that will be a subsequent step to kit assembly. And then we move on to packaging and labeling. And then, of course, QC testing to check that everything is okay with this kit build. And then we'll have the final QC inspection as well. Now, I'm not going to go through all the individual content or protocol steps for each of these parts, but my focus here today is going to be on how the electronic signatures play a role. So let's first take a look at the incoming material inspection. So the manufacturing process may involve 1, 2, or a few individuals that are part of your team. Some of them may be on the manufacturing team, some of them may be on the quality team, because you always want quality oversight, reviewing the work of everyone else in your organization. So in this case, the way the electronic signatures would work is once the actual task has been completed, and you'll note that each step in this particular task is being marked as complete, including any checklist items. So here, for example, I have a step to review the C of A and attach the actual C of A to the results section. So if I go to results here, we have a C of A that's attached, and also any deviations or non-compliance that was documented during the inspection. The reason I have this specified in the protocol steps is because, let's say, once the entire manufacturing build is completed, you would like to generate a report that captures all of this information. When you generate the report, it will include all of these steps marked as completed, any attachments that were included. So we have a log for incoming materials. This will also be included in the report. The certificate of authenticity, which is captured or attached as an attachment in the result. This will also be included in the report that's generated. And of course, lastly, for each task in SciNote that's completed, or each step of the manufacturing process in this case, the signatures will also be captured in the report that is generated. And one thing I'd like to point out here, if you notice, there's quite a few things going on here. The reason is because I actually signed off on this task previously once, revoked it, signed off on it again, and revoked it one more time. And I did this intentionally to show you that when a signature is completed and revoked, this will appear in the signature log for the task, as well as when the report is generated, this information will appear. For this particular task, it was just me signing off, but if there were more than one individual signing off on a task, all that information will appear here. Now let's go back to our workflow and take a look at a task that hasn't been signed off on. So you'll notice some of these tasks here are marked as done. Done indicates that every signature that was requested on this task has been signed off on. So now the task can be moved to done. If all the signatures have not been completed, the task would remain in review, and it cannot be moved to the status of done until all the signatures have been completed. And you'll notice I've set this up in a sort of a sequential workflow. Now, SciNote itself cannot prevent someone from jumping further ahead and completing one of these tasks, let's say the packaging and labeling task. SciNote as a system won't prevent that, which is why you would need your internal policy or procedure to dictate that when a task or a workflow is created in SciNote, that each task be completed in the sequence that it is intended to. In my example here, I would like the workflow to go from left to right. And for the preparations of each of these reagents, for my workflow, it's okay if they happen in parallel, but you cannot move to the kit assembly until each of these individual reagents have been prepared or completed. But for the case of requesting signatures, let's take a look at what that looks like in SciNote. So let's say all my protocol steps here are done for the kit assembly. I've captured the necessary results. I would then Well, ideally, I would move the status to in progress when I begin this task. But once it's done, I would move it to completed. And then from completed, you can then move it to in review. And when moving it to in review, you do get a notification that says when a task is moved to in review, editing of the task is disabled and the task is locked, which means now it's ready for signature approval. So in a moment here, you will see the option to sign off on this task. So right here, when I click sign task, it brings up the signature window. Of course, my signature is on there automatically, but I can also request additional signatures by clicking request signature down here. So when you click request signature, it will list a few other users that you can request signatures from. But keep in mind that in order to request a signature from someone, they would first have to have access to this project. And for them to have access, you would have to add them to this project. So when I created this project up here, Project Alpha Assay Kit Build, I added all these users to the project to make sure they had access to it. So that way I could request their signature on it for each task that has been completed. Now here, depending on what your internal policy dictates, you can request the relevant signatures. Typically, from my experience, the individual that performed the task, that would be me, also followed by an independent reviewer, someone that wasn't directly involved in the task to review the protocol and the results to make sure everything looks good. And lastly, of course, someone from your quality team or a quality rep would have to review and sign off on the task. So as you can see here, we have independent reviewer, quality, myself. And to sign off on the task, it's pretty straightforward. Click sign. You would use the same credentials that you use to log into SciNote. So now you can see that 1 out of 4 requested signatures have been signed off. And if you want to see who's pending, you can see it's the independent reviewer, quality. And if you need to send them a reminder notification, you can. And as I alluded to earlier, you can only revoke your own signature unless you're an organization administrator. So you can't revoke anyone else's signature and make changes to the task. They would have to revoke the signature themselves first. And one more thing, as I mentioned not too long ago, the task will remain in the status of in review until all the signatures have been completed before you can move the task to done. Now, coming back to our manufacturing workflow here, let's say all of these tasks were completed, all of them were signed off on, and now you need to generate a final report capturing the steps or protocols that were followed for each of these inspections, preparations, and also documenting the results and signatures. You can easily do that using the reporting function in SciNote. So we'd go to reports, say new report, select the project, first give the report a name. And here for the report within the project, we only had one batch, so I will leave that batch selected. If you had more than one batch, all those batches would appear. So you would see batch number 1, and if you had a second batch, you would see that as well. And in the report, you could choose to include both batches if you are generating a summary report, or in this case, we will just choose batch 1 for this report. And then within batch 1, it will list all the tasks. So as you remember, we have the incoming material inspection, the preparation of each of these reagents, QC steps, final QC inspection, and QC testing as well. Now, they're all a little bit out of order, but you can easily rearrange them in the order that you want. So let's say I want the inspection to come first, and then the reagent prep. But you get the idea. You can arrange it in the order that they were performed, so that way when the report's generated, the contents would appear in the order that you set here. So once we have everything, we can click Start Generating. Oh, sorry, I missed a step here. So once you select all the tasks, you also want to select within each task what information will be included in this report. So we have the protocols that we want to include, any items that were assigned. We definitely want to include results as well as file attachments, because remember, we attached the certificate of authenticity to the results. Task activity is optional. If you do include the task activity, it will add quite a few pages to your report because it captures every activity that was performed on each task. For this example, I won't select it, but we do want the electronic signatures because we want to see that each task was reviewed and signed off on by the required individuals when they were completed. All right, so now we have this report generating. Usually takes a few seconds. And there we have the report. So now you can see we have the report for this kit build. We have the first task, incoming material inspection. The task status is done. You have the name of the protocol that was followed. Each step marked as completed. Anything that was attached to the step you can download. And then of course we have the results section as here, results section here as well. I had a deviation that was captured, and then the C of A was attached, which you can also download. Any items that were assigned from your inventories will also be captured here. And the important part right here, the electronic signature is captured along with a history of signatures. Like I mentioned earlier, if you signed off on a task and revoked it, that information is captured here as well when you generate the report. And if we keep scrolling, you'll see for each task, we have the status. I didn't add any content to the protocol and results, but if there were any content that would be captured here, excuse me. And then we have the electronic signatures as well for each of the tasks. So this is a nice way to capture a summary report for each task or each step involved in your kit build, along with signatures from all the relevant individuals that were involved in the kit build as well. All right, so let's come back to SciNote here. Okay, so besides electronic batch records, what else could you possibly use the electronic signatures for? One other example that I'll quickly run through is if your organization processes external samples. So let's say you're a lab that receives samples or anything from external customers or clients, you're processing them in-house, running some tests, and then generating reports and sending them back to your customers or clients. You can definitely use the electronic signatures for that as well. So if we jump to this other team that I've created here. Okay, so I have a separate team that I've created for external sample processing. And for each of my clients, the way I've set it up is I will be creating a new project for each client that I'm working with. So we have client A here. And for client A, I may have a few different projects that I'm working on, and I'm choosing to capture each of these projects as an experiment. So here we have the first project for client A, or the first set of work that we're going to be doing. I have it statement of work 010, 14 June. And once again here, you'll see I've built a very similar workflow to that of the manufacturing workflow that we looked at, except in this case, it's tailored towards the steps or the different stages of processing or the different stages that the samples would go through. So initially we would receive and log the samples. Then we would check our instruments and reagents before performing any testing on the samples. In my case here, I'm doing some testing on DNA samples for this client. So I'm doing some DNA extraction and quantification, followed by some library prep to generate a library for this DNA. I have a QC step here to check the concentrations and make sure the library is good to go. And then with that same library, I'm doing some hybridization or hybrid capture, followed by a QC step before we jump into sequencing. And once the sequencing data is available, we're going to be doing some bioinformatics analysis. And then we will generate the client report, send it to the client, and once it's been approved, we can mark this final task as completed. Now, along the way, at each of these tasks, there may be different sets of individuals involved. So for the initial part, it may be one group that's involved in receiving and logging the samples in your storage location, depending on where you're storing it. And then we may have a different group that's reviewing the reagent expiration dates, instrument calibrations, ensuring that they're ready to use. And then we may have a different group that is actually performing the testing on these samples, such as the extraction, the library prep, hybrid capture, and doing the QC as well. And lastly, we may have a different group that's working on the sequencing part of it. And then, of course, a different group that is doing the bioinformatics analysis and pumping out the final data. And the client report may involve everyone that's working or that worked on this particular project here. So in the client report, you will probably end up requesting signatures from everyone that was involved in this particular project. Whereas for each of these steps along the way, it may be only the individuals that were directly involved in that step, along with someone from the quality team as well. Now, once again, this all depends on what your internal policy is. So it could change from organization to organization. And once again, with the reporting function, you can generate a report for this entire workflow here. So when you share it with the client, if they want to audit any of the steps, they can look at when each step was performed, if the appropriate individuals signed off on each task, and if there were any signatures that were revoked, if anything was changed. All of that will be available in the report for them as well. All right, so let's jump to a slightly different use case here. So let's say your organization is developing an assay or a diagnostic product, and you've finished with your early stage R&D and feasibility, and now you're ready to move into verification and validation testing, because this data is what you're going to be submitting to the FDA for approval. So in this case, I've created a separate team entirely for verification and validation because I want this data to be clean and separate from all of the R&D data. So I'll jump into my projects. Here I've used the folders to separate the validation testing from the verification testing. And when we open the verification testing, I have the first set of testing that I'm going to be doing, which is doing verification testing on the assay, in my case. And for the assay verification specifically, first thing that I'm going to be doing the study on is verifying the controls. So I've created an experiment for controls verification. Of course, as you verify each component of the assay, you will have additional experiments here. So we'll jump into the controls verification here. So once again, similar workflow setup here. And you can see that I've outlined each part or each step of the verification process as an individual task. So I have a separate task for sample size determination, because from my perspective, the sample size determination may involve someone from your biostats team, as well as someone from quality and also someone from the assay team, whereas requirements gathering may involve a slightly different group. And of course, the protocol review and approval might involve everyone from the biostats, quality, assay development, and then the actual testing may be just one or two individuals from the assay team. And then data review analysis, once again, would involve everyone. And of course, the report, verification report review and approval would involve everyone from beginning to end. So once again, for each of these tasks, you can request the relevant signatures as needed. So for the final task here, ideally you would request signatures from everyone that was involved, including someone from the quality team. Whereas for some of these tasks, such as testing, it may just be the individual that performed the testing, an independent reviewer, and someone from quality. And for sample size determination, it may just be someone from biostats, someone from quality, and someone from the assay team. All right, so this is just another example. And once again, once the controls verification study is done, if you want to generate a report, you can use the reporting function to generate a report for this entire experiment here. And the report would include the electronic signatures as well as all the data. And one more thing I didn't mention earlier with the reports, they are initially generated as a PDF, but you can generate them as a Word doc as well if you want to add anything to the report or change any of the formatting slightly. All right. Now let's jump to a slightly different use case that I have here, which is equipment management. So once again, I've created a separate team for equipment management because in my hypothetical lab here, I have a lot of instruments that need to be calibrated and that need to go preventative maintenance on a regular basis. So it's easier for me to have a separate team to manage all of this data because I don't want this data cluttering up my workspace where I'm doing R&D testing, V&V testing, or anything else. So this team right here will be solely dedicated just for equipment management. And the way I've set things up is I've first created a project for instrument management. You can create a project for instrument calibration and then a separate project for instrument maintenance if you'd like. Or you can create a project for each instrument that you have in your lab. Or you can create a project for each lab. And within that project, each instrument can be an experiment. So it's pretty flexible in how you can set it up. And of course, you do have the folders available to you to create additional layers to suit your specific organizational needs. Okay, so let's jump into this instrument management project. So here I have a Biorad instrument that I've created an experiment for. And when I open this instrument, each calibration instance, so each date that I perform a calibration on is created as a task. As you can see, maybe I'll change the view so you can see this a little bit better. So we have calibration done on March 10th, on April 10th, May 10th, June 10th, and July 10th. And as you can see, some of these are marked as done, which indicate that the signatures have been approved for both of these tasks. And this one is in progress. But let's take a quick look at how I've set up the calibration procedure for this particular instrument. So the way I've done it is I have a calibration protocol template that I've saved to my protocol templates. And every time I have a calibration procedure that needs to be done, I can just load that template in directly to the task. And as you can see here, I have checklists for each of these steps. And as they're completed, they can be marked as complete. And once again, all of this information is captured in the activity log and audit trail. And we'll touch on the audit trail in a little bit here. So as I'm marking these as complete, you can see I have a data table here that can also be filled out. For example, And then we have a post-calibration check to ensure the forms were completed, calibration logs were exported and attached. And then we also have some calibration forms here that I've attached. And just as an example here, you can fill this form out directly in SciNote. You just click Edit in Word for the web. And then here, depending on what information is required in your form, you can fill it out. And for the signature initials, you can either just type out your initials or say refer to e-signature here. So now when I close this, all those changes would be captured in this form. And of course, I can move this to complete, in review, and then sign off on it. So my electronic signature here fulfills the requirements of signing off on the calibration form down here. And as I mentioned, every time you need to perform a calibration again, you can either create a new task, load the protocol from the templates, or simply just duplicate one of these tasks here. And then you can rename the task, and all the protocol steps, including the 2 forms that we saw, will be copied over as well, making things a lot easier for you. Okay, now the final use case related to electronic signatures that we'll be looking at today is training records. So once again, I've created a separate team to capture all my training record information and manage all of it in SciNote. So let me go to projects. So in your organization, as you have new employees or even current employees, they will need to be trained on your internal SOPs or any procedures they'll be performing on. And all this training information needs to be captured and documented in a manner that's compliant. And of course, they will require signatures from each individual that is being trained, acknowledging that they have reviewed the procedure or SOP, they understand it, and they're acknowledging that they've been trained on it with their signature. So the way I've captured it here is for each employee or each individual in the organization, I've created a project. So I've created one for myself here. And then I've split it into quality system related training, which would be all procedural SOPs. And then, of course, procedure specific training, which is more on how to perform certain procedures in the lab or use certain software or use certain equipment. So I've split these as experiments. And then when I open this QMS training experiment, here I have a list of actual SOPs that need to be reviewed and signed off on by the individual. So let's take a look at one of these SOPs here. Or actually, let me open maybe SOP 3 here. Okay, so the steps are pretty simple. The way I've set it up is I have the name of the SOP here. The first step is an instruction to review the attached SOP. So the actual approved SOP I've attached as a PDF here. So the user, in this case myself, would review the attached SOP. And once I've reviewed it, I would mark it as complete and mark this step as complete. And then I have an instruction here that says I need to acknowledge that I've reviewed and understood the SOP, and I need to do this in the results section of this task. And the more specific instruction is copy this statement, paste it in the task. And the statement is basically an acknowledgement that I have read and understood the attached SOP. So when I sign off on this task, that will be my signature saying that, yes, I've read this SOP, and I verify and sign off that I have understood it as well. And the way to do it is pretty simple. I would just copy this statement here. go to my results. Add a new result. I would paste the statement. Of course, I would replace the your name here with my name. Add this here. Come back to the protocol and move this to completed. And then in review. And then sign off on this. Now with training logs or training records, generally from my experience, it's sufficient if the individual that's being trained signs off on it. It doesn't require any additional signatures. But of course, depending on your internal policy, that may vary. But once again, if you do require an additional signature from someone on the quality team, that can be included here. And then this can be moved to done. So now, let's say there is a new individual joining my team. So let's say Ava here is now joining my organization. Essentially what I would do is I would create a new project for Ava's training records here. And since I've already set up all the tasks in this experiment, all I'm going to be doing is copying this entire experiment. So now change the name, we change the view as well. So now for Ava, she would have to come in, open each of these tasks. Go through the steps, review the SOP, mark that it's been reviewed, copy the statement in the results, and then she would have to sign off on it, so it would have her signature. Now, where this gets helpful is, let's say at some point you need to generate training records or training logs for all of your employees. All you'd have to do is go to the reports here in SciNote, generate a report for each employee, and since each employee is their own project, you can just select that project, select the QMS training, and then you would get a report that includes the information of which SOP it was, when the training was done, the signature from the individual acknowledging that they completed review and understand the SOP, and of course, an attachment of the SOP itself if that's needed. And as you get more employees, every time you would just have to create a new project, copy the experiment over as a template, and it would copy basically all the tasks that we have here. It would copy the names, all the content in the protocol steps, including the SOP that's attached, but it wouldn't copy anything from the results section. So the acknowledgement statement wouldn't be there when you copy it as a template. So that way, for the new employee, they would still have to copy the statement acknowledging that they reviewed the SOP, paste it in the results section, and of course, the signatures don't get copied over, so they would have to sign off on it with their own signature, acknowledging that they reviewed and understood the SOP. Okay, so that's all the use cases I wanted to cover related to electronic signatures. The other feature that I wanted to focus on today is the audit trail. So in SciNote, as part of the 21 CFR add-on, we do have a very detailed and thorough audit trail that captures each and every activity or change that is done in SciNote, and it captures when the change was done and who did the change. So let's take a look at an example of what that might look like. So let me open one of the projects we looked at today. So let's say I have my reagents and instrument check here. I will add new step. And then we'll also do the same for the results. All right, so now to access the audit trail, that can be done by going to your settings here, teams, and then finding the team. And then up here, there's an option called audit trail. So when you click on that, it's going to pull up a very long and detailed list of various actions that were performed in SciNote. So what we just did recently is we added a new step in the task, and we also added a new result. So here you can see for the record name, we have the name of the project, and name of the experiment, name of the task, and the name of the result, that the result was created. And then here we actually have result text that was added. So if I expand this right here, you'll see the old value says null. That indicates that there was nothing there before. And now the new value, which is a text that I pasted, is new result added. So now if I were to go back to the particular task that we had, and I go to the result, and for some reason, let's say I modify the result. So now we go back to our audit trail. So right now, previously we had result created, result text record created. Now for the same result text, we have record updated. So if I expand this, you can see the old value, which is what I had before, new result added, and I changed that to result has been modified. So now you can see what it was before and what it is now. And of course, if you're looking for something very specific, we do have some filters that you can use. So you can use the start and end date. You can also filter by record type. So if you're looking for something related to results, you can filter by results. If you're looking for something related to signatures, so if I filter by signature, you'll see that I signed off on this sample. And similarly, if there were any signatures revoked, that would appear here. And the last thing with the audit trail, you can export all of this information as a CSV. And with the CSV, you can search for something more specific because in Excel, you can add the filters and also use the search function to search for a more specific change within a particular task that you're looking for. And one general recommendation that I would give is before you jump directly into the audit trail is to use the activity log first. So if you recall, each task in SciNote has an activity log, and that can be found here. So if you know there was something changed in this task, or if you want to know if something was changed, I would start here in the activity log because here we have a little bit more filters that you can use. You can filter by task result. You can look at result edited, result added. You can look by date range. And you can also filter by users. So once you've narrowed down the information here to a specific date range, then you can go back to the audit trail, input that date range, use the filter for either result, step, protocol, etc. And that will help you find what you're looking for a little faster. And lastly, one thing with the audit trail I'd like to mention is with regards to compliance, it is a recommended best practice to have regular audit trail reviews to mitigate any compliance risk or regulatory risk that might be there. And you could even manage these audit trail reviews in SciNote. You can create a separate team called audit trail review and have projects or tasks in there for each audit trail review that's conducted. You could export the entire audit trail as a CSV, attach it to the task as proof of which audit trail was reviewed. You can leave any comments on there for any discrepancies that might be found and what mitigations you put in place to address these discrepancies. And of course, the frequency of audit trail can vary depending on your internal policies. Again, you can have them on a project-to-project basis. You could do them quarterly or yearly. So once again, that depends entirely on you. And since we're almost out of time, and I want to leave some time for questions, the last few points I'd like to mention. I mentioned the use of unlimited teams earlier on, and we've kind of explored how that can help you through the course of this webinar. Because as I mentioned, I've created a separate team for each of these distinct activities. So for equipment management, training record management, V&V data, manufacturing, I have different teams to kind of isolate this data and make sure it's not cluttering up or kind of messing with any other data that I have going on. And this way you can also control which users have access to which data in SciNote. Since accessibility and permissions is also an important part of compliance, you can control that at the team level as well as on the project level. And then lastly, I'd like to mention some of the data security features that you can take advantage of, since data security is also a very important aspect of compliance. So of course you have your login credentials to log into SciNote, but if you do want to implement two-factor authentication, you can do that by going to My Profile, enabling the 2FA here. And our 2FA does work with a couple of authenticator apps. And if you want more information on that, just let us know. And lastly, we do have single sign-on that we can enable for you. So if your organization wants to implement single sign-on, once again, reach out to us and we can help you with that as well. So with that being said, Ava, I'll hand it over to you for any questions.
All right, so we have a quiet audience today, so I haven't received any question. We still have 8 minutes more or less, so it's your last chance to send through your questions. If nothing comes up to your mind now or you have doubts later, you can reach out to your CSM directly, or you can also reach out to us at premiumsupport@scinote.net. So maybe we give it just 1 extra minute to see if anything comes out.
Yep, sounds good. And I guess in the meantime, I will take this opportunity to include our survey link in the chat box. Oh, it looks like we have a question.
Yes, so Alex, yes, can you please drop your email here? And this is probably for everyone who wants the recording of this webinar. Just drop your emails in the Q&A so that we can send you the recording later. And I guess we don't have other questions just because your use cases were great and very clear. So thank you. And yeah, as Arun mentioned, he actually just dropped this webinar survey in the chat. You should all be able to see it. And if you complete it, you will be entitled of a discount on your next upsell. So I would take this chance.
Yep, please do
right.
fill out the feedback survey because we do give you the opportunity to include any other topics that you'd like to see covered in future webinars. So if you think of a topic that your organization might find useful, please include that in there and we'll be happy to put together a webinar focused on that particular topic. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions,
Nope.
I would like to thank everyone for your time today. And once the recording is available, I'll be sharing it with everyone that requested a recording. And if you do realize you want a recording later, you can always just email us. We have the recordings available and they will be going up on our site as well. So I can share the link for you from there. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Eva.
See you next time.